Good evening, meat suits. Welcome back to Read It and Weep, a podcast about movies and friendship. This is the final episode of Season 5, the finale of Kevin Bacon's Exquisite Corpse. And we're just three guys wearing masks, but naked from the neck down, playing a very long movie-watching game that has finally come to an end. We will have some post-game wrap-ups after the holidays, but in the new year. But first, we're going to do our last episode of this game. As you naked from the waist down?
I was just, you said neck down, so I was thinking, wait, am I allowed to have a neckerchief or not? That's what I was trying to think of.
I think, I think neck down is including the neck, so a neckerchief would be a blocker for that.
Okay. I can do like a, I don't know, like a sort of like a fake beard if I want then?
Yeah,
I think it's a real, mask. It's a real rule of cool, weird.
Oh, yeah, that's all right. Can you make it work?
Yeah, you make it work?
Are
then,
you
you
pulling
can
it
wear
off?
the neckerchief. Yeah, it's the rule of cool. That's what you got to go for.
So let me introduce you to the panel. I'm your host, Alex Falcon, recording as always in North Koreatown, Los Angeles. I'm back from my brief sojourn to Texas, and I am joined by a slightly reduced panel due to ice storms. First up, he's at Anthony Lopez, part 2 on Twitter. He's in Southeast Portland. And Anthony, I just want to let you know that if you breathe a word of this podcast to anybody, there will be dire consequences for you and your family. It's Anthony Lopez.
He did a bad thing. Did a bad thing. You ever love someone so much you want to break your heart into? I didn't think so.
Hey guys, I am so excited to be here to discuss my favorite movie from one of my favorite filmmakers. It's not necessarily my favorite movie of all time, but certainly I absolutely love this movie.
It's in your top half of your Kubrick.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely... I mean, we've done my two favorite Kubricks now on this podcast, this and Barry Lyndon. 1 and 2.
Do you have a Kubrick rubric for like how much, what they have to have for the good stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, this one and Barry Lyndon both have this very interesting story with the guy who plays Red Mask in it. We'll probably tell that in a little bit. But anyway, I'm excited for this. I am, I definitely feel like this episode is going to fall in that maybe still processing category. But I just want to let you boys know I am willing to get naked, put on the least attractive thong ever made, and hold your hand as I walk you through.
Are you just talking about how like 90s thongs, the side went all the way up to your armpit? Is that what you mean?
Well, this movie in particular features the least sexy thongs ever made.
It also had some of the least sexy masks I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. I would say some of the least sexy sex.
No, yeah, I mean, unarguably. I mean, this movie is like I think a lot of people miscalculate
it makes
this as an
feel
erotic thriller.
Kind of a drag. That's how I feel coming out of this.
This is one of the least sexy movies to have so much sex in it, and that's a part of why I love it so much. This movie is straight up. It is Wizard of Oz for adults. It is an absolute masterpiece. I've seen this movie a bunch of times. Every time I see it, I take something new away from it.
In 1999, when I was only 15, I don't think I would have ever had sex. I think this would have discouraged me. It would have been like, I don't know, man, maybe this is not for me. It would make me want to play piano, but pretty much nothing else.
I don't know. It didn't end up well for that guy either, as far as I know.
I would just keep my mouth shut. But I would play piano. This guy's got 3 gigs in one night, Ezra.
Yeah.
This guy is crushing it.
So here's the thing. Anthony, I'm so glad you said this, because I was just thinking, when I finished this movie, I was like, I want to meet the monster that says this is their favorite movie. Because I could not imagine. I could not imagine the person who would say like, this is like in my top. Like if I knew nothing about this person, said like favorite movie, Eyes Wide Shut, man. I'd be like, what are you into? I don't know what your deal is that would do it. And so I'm really curious to have all my misconceptions like utterly turned upside down.
I think this is really perfect too. Like I'm sad Hunter isn't here, but I do think because so I've seen this movie a bunch of times. I saw it when it came out, and like one of the reasons I love Stanley Kubrick so much, so filmmakers like him, David Lynch is a great example of this. Is who's my top favorite filmmaker of all time, is that as someone who grew up watching their movies, every time I rewatch a Stanley Kubrick movie, like I take something new from it. And that's so much depending on who I am as a person, where I am in my life. Like, and Eyes Wide Shut is a great example. Probably, I think, the best example of like, I saw this in 1999 when I was 13 years old. I definitely took away a very specific thing from it. That is not what I get now from it, right? I saw this in my early 20s, and I definitely like took to like this movie as about like, masculine traits and insecurities and all that stuff, all the stuff that a 20-year-old dude would take from this movie. And now that I've seen this movie as a 30-year-old who's been in a long-term relationship for 13 years, married for 5, with my wife together for 8 years before that, and with 2 other guys who have also been in very, very long-term relationships.
Like one of the shorter relationships on this show.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that,
which is wild
to me, rewatching this movie now as a married man in my 30s, this movie just floored me when I rewatched it this time. I think this is one of the greatest movies about relationships and long-term like marriage and stuff like that.
This is fascinating. This is fascinating. I hate to do this to you, Anthony, but I'm going to have to pause because we are still in the middle of the introductions.
I know.
And you're so excited to talk about this movie.
This is the thing we have.
This is why we didn't postpone when Hunter got snowed in a second day in a row, is because we have to talk about it now. We got to get it off our brains. But first, let me introduce you to your other co-host today. He's in Northern California, and I wasn't even gonna let him into the show today, but then he flashed a medical badge, and so I decided to let him be here. It's Dr. Ezra Fox.
Also, I have the password, so don't ask me.
Do you have both passwords?
Oh no, I didn't realize.
That's such a good trick.
It's
make up a second password.
The password thing is the thing I'm most upset about in this whole movie. But we'll come back. We're going to come back to it. We're going to talk about it later. First of all, so Hunter got snowed in. Hunter was traveling for the holidays. He was supposed to be at his midpoint today where he could record. Well, he was supposed to be there yesterday and didn't make it, and then he couldn't make it today.
Don't worry, guys. He didn't like break the rules, and no one's there trying to redeem him right now. It's cool.
Back in Seattle,
he's totally cool.
Playing piano with Mrs. Hunter right now. He's fine. But anyway, we're going to talk about we're going to get through this episode without him. We'll bring him back for a wrap next in a couple weeks. And we are going to talk, as we've mentioned, we're going to talk about Eyes Wide Shut here in a few minutes, including where are the vampires, how much giggling is normal at an orgy, and what toy store is the best for breaking up with your wife. But first, I want to thank all of our fabulous meat buddies. No. Okay, but if you were going to pick a toy store to have the conversation, should we break up? Should it be F.A.O. Schwartz, or are you more of a Toys R Us couple? Well, but first, I'd like to thank all of our fabulous meat buddies who have kept the show going. Especially today, I want to send a little shout out to Linnea, who has been a meat buddy since 2016 and came out to see me at Cap City in Austin last week, among other people whose names I did not write down. But I appreciate everybody who came out, and it was great to see all of you. And if you want to join them and keep this podcast limping down the tracks, you can go to Metreon.com, and we appreciate everybody who has ever supported the show. Okay, we have so much to get through. We have a lot of news. There's a lot of news. Ezra, 30 seconds. Donut news update. What is happening in the donut world? We still eating Santa's belly, or is there something else happening?
I think we're still on Santa's belly. Here, hold on. A very merry original glazed dozen for only $2 if you buy another dozen. They really want you to eat more.
There is a point where a donut is too cheap. That seems suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, I think the margin on donuts is like it's like popcorn basically, where it's like
all margin.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes like this. You guys ever think about like you get like the 99-cent tacos from Jack in the Box, and you're like, you guys make money on these? How do you like? Yeah. What does this actually cost if you're profiting on 99-cent tacos? Is fucked up.
It's messed up. I don't trust it. Okay, so a couple of things. We got some movie news. We don't always do movie news in the news segment, but we have a bunch of movie news this week. First, we were chatting about this in the Discord, so I have to bring it up quickly, which is Black Adam was dropped from the Detective Comics Cinematic Universe reboot this week. And we were joking about it because we were talking about how The Rock is like notoriously thin-skinned about things. And
didn't you see in his comment he put, I have thick skin.
Exactly. And then he said his specific comment about when this did not work out was him saying, I have thick skin, which is really, going after the problem. That's an aspirational thing I think he wrote for himself in that. But as much as fun as it is to make fun of him because the movie doesn't seem like it was that good, and like to put all of your faith in this like DC villain making the like thing that saves being the same that saves the universe. 2 weeks ago, you may recall on this very show, we talked about how I'd put a few weeks and $200 into a TikTok and it flopped and it was ruining my life. I cannot fathom what it is like to have a movie you're in flop, let alone where you are like the star and the driving force and you've like bet the farm on this movie. Like the process is so long, the investment is so high that, and just to have it come out and not be that good, I just cannot imagine how that feels.
Yeah, and especially when it's like a passion project of yours, which Black Adam seems to have been for The Rock for a very long time.
But yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of those things where like it his sort of love and hubris and ego went so, because I think those things are definitely important, especially in making something like a big blockbuster, right? But I think it went so far around that it kind of comes back around, and I stopped feeling bad for The Rock, and I start feeling like good that this happened to him, just because of how look, we've talked a lot about The Rock on this podcast. I have loved The Rock since I was literally in middle school. Since he was a wrestler, he has meant so much to me. But he's just disappointed me so much over the past few years between like the roles he picks, his like public persona.
Yeah, he's not focused on quality, The Rock.
No, and like this illusion that like he is this massive box office draw where like he's been in some successful movies, but none of his movies have ever been like, massive hits minus the Fast franchise, right?
I sort of feel like if he maybe was more selective and cared about quality, maybe he would be a draw, because every movie that he's in that sucks, he's doing a pretty decent job. Like one of the things I love about The Rock is that he is always, if the movie's a 3, he's always still a 4. Like he's the bright spot in terrible movies. So like imagine if he did good movies.
Well, I mean, like I think if you compare him to like his contemporary other wrestlers who have turned actors, right? Which are like right now Dave Bautista and John Cena. And like John Cena and Dave Bautista are honestly like two I think of the most exciting actors currently working in American
currently punching
film.
For sure.
I mean, they like look at like someone like Bautista who like could be like The Rock. He could just be doing big action movies, but instead he's working with Denis Villeneuve in really small roles. He's working with M. Night Shyamalan. He's working in
he's working with Rian Johnson.
The Rock could
the Glass Onion one was so much fun.
Yeah,
he was great in Glass Onion for
fun role.
He's willing to be in small roles, making fun of himself that are very egoless. Something that The Rock, I mean, like the thing that makes the Black Adam bombing like funny to me is that like I think if he had done it how it logically should have been done, which is like Black Adam is a Shazam villain, and like you introduce him in a Shazam movie and you build to your own thing rather than being like, no, I'm The Rock. I need I'm gonna need my own movie. I don't want Shazam in it, and I'm only gonna fight Superman. It would be like if he wanted to be like, I want to be Lex Luthor, but I only want to fight Aquaman. I don't want to fight my villain, my arch nemesis, Superman.
I would love that version of Lex also, though, where just like just Superman cannot like get the time of day from him, and he's just like, no, I have to realize that my true nemesis is Aquaman.
That would be such a villain flex if you're like, no, I want to fight Superman.
Oh, here's the thing: we know Superman like probably hates Aquaman, right? And like looks down on him, and like the fact that like his villain is only fighting the worst superhero, I think would be such a good long-term play.
But yeah, I mean,
don't know if I agree with you that Aquaman's the worst superhero, but yes.
It comes down to like Shazam's either's not like, is it that one that he just thinks Shazam's not a big enough name, or is it because Shazam, like his whole thing is that he's a child who turns into Shazam? Is The Rock that insecure that he will not get beat up by a child? Is that like honestly?
Also, people like Shazam, right? Isn't the Shazam movie good?
Well, and I think people have low expectations also, right? Where it's like, I wasn't expecting anything from Muscly Big, but we got it.
But like it's so because like going back to the wrestling thing, like
I just figured out what Muscly Big. I get it.
Yeah, one of the things about like The Rock as a wrestler, if you were a fan back then, is one of the things he was most kind of always famous for is he was always willing to pit over anyone he was asked. Right? He was a very egoless wrestler. He would lose matches all the time. He would pit over the next big, face the company wanted, and he would pit him over hard. He would make them look like $1 million to help other people out. But he's like not willing to do that now as an actor when people know movies are fake. Like in wrestling, he's willing to lose, and there are people who think that's real. But in movies that people know is completely fake, he's like not willing to fit over.
The fight between Black Adam and Shazam is determined ahead of time. We're all on that same page.
Yeah, it's just like it's insane. That
it is really crazy. Seems like such an ego monster, and that's why him saying like I have a thick skin is so funny, is because he just doesn't seem like it.
I mean, people with thick skin are famous for just searching the term Black Adam and responding to people.
Well, yeah, you also know them as the people who put out big statements where they refer to their thick skin.
Yeah.
That's like a real thin skin. Okay, but we have to move on from The Rock because we have to also talk, because we're talking about Eyes Wide Shut today, and there is a whole mess of cruise news this week. So this is the time where if we were paying for copyrighted music, we'd play Surfing USA or Cruising USA. Sorry, that makes way more sense.
You know what I've learned?
What?
If we analyze, we can do 30 seconds if we're analyzing it later. So if you want to analyze,
that is true legally speaking.
Yeah. No,
but that is not. We don't care about the legality of this.
Oh,
YouTube has extrajudicial review, and they will take your video down, and you have no recourse. And if somebody drove by your house right now playing Cruising USA loud enough, we would turn off our video.
Well, so we would lose the video. What about this?
You did a bad thing. You did a bad thing.
Is that okay? Can I do that?
Screens just go black.
Right, so some cruise news. First of all, Tom put out his now becoming traditional holiday greeting, where he is falling out of a plane and he wishes you a happy year of movies.
Oh, yeah.
Which is extremely impressive, not because he's skydiving with a camera. That seems like it's pretty doable, but you don't hear any of the wind noise. That is some professional level audio that you can hear his dialogue as he's skydiving. But he also released this week, even crazier, is he released a 10-minute mini documentary about the filming of a stunt he did for Mission Impossible 23 that's coming out soon. I don't know what number this is. 6, 7?
I think this would be... Yeah, this would be 6.
This is 6, okay.
4 was Rogue Nation, 5. No, so this would be 7. Yeah, Rogue Nation was definitely 4. Then the first McQuarrie one, and then the second McQuarrie one.
Yeah,
now
7.
Yeah. So this one involves a jump. They're calling the biggest jump in cinema history, possibly the biggest stunt in cinema history. And the video is bonkers, and the stunt is crazy. Although I also feel like people jump motorcycles off cliffs in movies all the time. So like I do wonder how impactful the stunt actually is in the movie. Like it doesn't, the end result was like really cool filming and like cool how he did. I loved the process. I think the final stunt is fine. But basically what he does is he jumps a motorcycle off a cliff off a big jump built on a cliff, which I don't know what the plot of this movie is, but why did they just leave that jump right there? That seems like they were just asking for.
It's trouble. Like a legend, like a King Arthur kind of thing, where it's like he who jumps off the cliff,
gets the sword. But he jumps off on a motorcycle and then pulls a parachute and glides down and off this crazy cliff in Norway. And
I just to get a quick little plug in there. I watched. There's a longer version of this online, and then when I went to go see Avatar this week in IMAX, they do a shorter version of this that plays right before Avatar, and like
nice.
I saw this on
when
my
you said
phone.
A quick plug. You meant a quick plug for James Cameron's Avatar 2.
I just wanted to real fast. I did see Avatar: The Way of Water this week. It fucking owns bones. I cannot suggest it enough. It is a masterpiece. I loved it dearly. But anyway, so I want to say I watched this Tom Cruise video on my phone the first time, and I was like, "Oh, that's impressive." But then watching it on the IMAX screen and realizing this behind the scenes footage was shot in IMAX or with IMAX cameras, so that they could have these shots on there. So there's like a drone shot that it's like looking over the ramp and then it goes over it and you see the giant drop, and seeing that on a big screen was so like spectacular and took my breath away and really makes it much more impactful. That I can't wait to see what it looks like in the actual movie.
Well, my other question about how this looks, I made a joke about this jump, right? But obviously they're CGing out the jump, right? The ramp. So there's
maybe.
Right?
Who knows what the plot.
I mean, it's made out of plywood and like it clearly, like they have to take it out, I assume. You don't. You were assuming that's still in there. You're assuming that it's supposed to be like, oh, they were setting up this motocross jump off a cliff in Norway in the world.
I
think the shot is in the trailer, right? And the ramp is still there. Like I don't know. That's one of my favorite things about Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise's relationship is that, you know, he talked about this with the last Mission Impossible too. It's just like Tom Cruise comes up with stunt ideas. And then McQuarrie's job is to, 1, find a country that will allow them to do them. And then 2, write a story that ties in all these stunts. And like the last Mission Impossible
and 3 to like guzzle Maylocks, I think, probably also at the same time.
It's a stressful day, man, when they're like, hey, we have this most expensive movie star in the world, and we're going to let him jump off a cliff 6 times today.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And first, he's like, I gotta go get warmed up by doing a few skydives.
Yeah. Don't be careful, be competent is the line that I like so much.
That's from his trainer.
Video.
So the training process is really interesting because he has a motocross trainer and he does thousands of motocross jumps. And then he has a parachuting base jump coach that works on him with skydives. And then they practice it over a quarry where they catch the motorcycle, and he's on a wire so he can practice his dismount off the bike. And all of that is so extremely cool.
Well,
and it seems really fun.
They did it. They have him do the jump a bunch of times so that they can like mathematically calculate his
right.
So they know where to pit the drones. It is so cool. That
all
kind
of this
like
is extremely cool. But I will say, as far as the movie goes, all of this sort of belies that maybe a spy doesn't have time to do this training, that he'd be so busy spying. When did he have time to do 3 years of for one jump to escape one bad guy, presumably?
I mean, he probably wouldn't have done, you know, that's how you lose a lot of spies. You know, sometimes they die. They don't all make it.
Yeah, you're we don't have time for you to be competent. Be replaceable.
Yeah. But yeah, Dead Reckoning comes out next year, and I am so excited to see it. It looks cool. Day one.
And then the stunt where he was skydiving was for a different movie, right? For the holiday message?
No. So they're shooting 1 and 2 together. So these are going to be, they say at least, these are going to be the final 2 Mission Impossible movies.
Right.
Dead Reckoning 1 and 2. So they're shooting both of them. They shot most of 1 and some of 2, and now they're kind of shooting and finishing up 1 right now, but they're shooting mostly 2.
The other thing I wanted, I enjoy Tom Cruise's holiday. I like, you know, he's got a Christmas card to YouTube where he does something expensive and stupid. I love that. Yeah. That's a great thing. But every year he says, like, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for the film goers. I'm doing this because, like, so you can. And I just feel like people should be honest with themselves. I think he likes doing this.
No, I think he does too. But I honestly believe. I mean, that's one of the things about like. I think Tom Cruise and Jackie Chan, I think they are doing it for the audience members, right? They are doing this. I say this is the same with like all stunt guys, right? Most, especially when you think about like stunt men in general who do crazy stunts and are the most anonymous people in all of movie making, right? Like the stunt guys aren't doing it. They do it because they obviously like doing it because they enjoy the craft, but they
like
do
being part of something cool.
Stunts. Yeah,
I like to do something cool. I just don't think Tom Cruise gives a shit about me. And I just think I just feel like there's a dishonesty in this Christmas card, which is traditional for Christmas cards that you tell how your family's doing, and it's maybe a little more glowing than they're actually doing. I get it. But it does feel like he's whitewashing the fact that it seems fun.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's trying to hide that it seems fun.
I would love to do a motorcycle jump into a base jump with that kind of, if I had them, like if people were paying me and I had all those trainers, that sounds like a fun 2-year project.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Great. It starts now, Alex. We're doing it.
Yeah.
I want, I don't know, $2-3 million a year. Yeah. And then the training budget. I want all of my motorcycles that I explode to be covered.
I want to cut forward 2 years where you're just like, ugh, I'm so tired of these jumps. You know, you're just like,
I'm so tired of motorcycles.
No,
because I do not like base jumping. So base jumping is like probably the most dangerous thing humans have invented. It's really, really silly.
What about Russian roulette?
I think it might be worse than 1 in 6 in terms of people who do it. Okay, I don't know. It's really dangerous. I mean, the person who invented it died doing it. It's on that Wikipedia page that I don't recommend. It's really terrible.
Helicopters are also very, very dangerous.
They're not as bad as base jumping. Base jumping is worse than all of these other things that you think of as really dangerous for this sort of thing. But so I don't like base jumping as a rule. But this looks super fun. He gets to fly into a gorge in Norway, a gorged way.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to move on. That's the cruise news. But now we got to talk about the cruise. If there's a phrase that makes everybody want to listen to the rest of the podcast, I think it's Tom Cruise at an orgy. That is what we're going to discuss right now. It's time for segment 2, the game. For the last year, we've been playing a movie watching game. As you know, we set goal movies, and then on our turns, we tried to navigate the show through actors in common with the previous movie in a classic Kevin Bacon style. We call it Kevin Bacon's Exquisite Corpse. It does seem like this game could be playable with a little more testing. But anyway, it's over now. This week, we're watching Eyes Wide Shut, the 1999 erotic mystery psychological drama, directed, produced, and co-written by Stanley Kubrick. It is based on the 1926 novella Traumnovelle, which is, that's my... What?
Dream Story is the name.
Dream Story is what it means in German. Dream Story.
Yes.
It definitely looks more like trauma novel, so which I kind of like. But anyway, it's by Arthur Schnitzler, and this movie is of course starring Nicole Kidman, who is mostly naked, Sidney Pollack, Mary Richardson, and the cruise missile himself, Mr. Thomas Cruise, who is not naked, who refuses to get naked.
This you know what this felt like? This felt like the planes, trains, and automobiles of just trying to cheat on your wife and failing. Like he gets real close in lots of ways, but doesn't quite do it as much as he thought he was gonna.
The way planes, trains, and automobiles, they want to get home for Thanksgiving. This movie is about wanting to get it in with someone who's not your wife,
and just thwarted at many turns.
Every stop, I feel but we're out of rental cars. Yeah. I mean, it's never like fully or it's frequently not fully thwarted. It's always like a lot of the times it's like, not like this. That's Tom Cruise's cheating face is like, not like this.
Yeah, it also.
And I will say, he looks good with his shirt off, but dude's got his crazy eyes. I don't know. He's a good-looking man, but crazy eyes.
I mean,
that guy.
Both of them are at the most powerful in terms of attractiveness. Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise in this movie.
He's got crazy eyes, though.
So good in this movie. Nicole Kidman in particular is amazing.
I think they are both very good. Let me give you guys a summary. If you have not watched, I'm going to give you the full and complete summary in just 4 points. This is my patented micro summary of the movie Eyes Wide Shut from 1999. Tom Cruise is so jealous of his wife cheating on him in a dream that he goes on a sexual bender that involves repeatedly considering being unfaithful to her. His wicked deeds include such horrible infidelities as buying a cake for a prostitute, mouth breathing over the phone to Greg from Dharma and Greg, and briefly observing an orgy run by the mob. The orgy has this orgy, though, it's a wild night for him because this orgy has both a password and a guest list, which is the classic belt and suspenders of orgy entrance requirements. And since he wasn't technically invited, even though he does have the password, it is required by the strict bylaws, that he must be murdered to keep him from telling anybody what he saw.
We don't know what was going to happen. Right?
And you think it's the mob that's running the organization? Is that what you think it is?
Only reasonable conclusion.
Man, it's just normal rich people stuff. This is all. It's regular rich people.
It's not rich people. Guys. It's got to be Masons, right? This is the Masons.
Well, okay, have you considered the fact that the story is called Dream Story, and maybe literally nothing in this movie is literal?
Oh man,
that's another way to view it as well.
Finish the
Are we
summary.
inside a snow globe?
You could tell me that later. Okay. In the meantime, the thing that they're going to murder him over is to keep him from telling anybody what he saw. And let's be clear about what he saw. He saw a bunch of rich dorks. He saw the dorkiest dorks. They're cosplaying as monks and then pushing their masks together to make them kiss like a kid playing with Barbies. Including there was a scene where two women are 69ing with masks.
I was wondering. Well, we didn't see the mask, but I was curious about that.
They were wearing masks. We did see the masks.
Yeah.
They were not. That was not. No one was having a great time there. But anyway,
unless
apparently
that's your thing. In which case, good for you.
In which case, dorks. They're dorks. But by a technicality of the orgy bylaws, he must die, or a prostitute may offer to die in his place, which really doesn't seem like a great deterrent. Right? It doesn't sound like that'll stop him from telling other people.
I don't think this was dying, but keep on going.
Well, she dies. She's
dead.
Yeah.
I think those separate things, though. I think it was like...
You believe the rich guy who's like, these are separate things?
No, I think there's a redeeming thing, and then later they also killed her.
Or, again,
that doesn't make any sense. But apparently, anyway, they have a strict somebody must pay with their blood, but we're not particular about whose blood policy for party crashers. That's what the orgy has stated to us. Anyway, so then him and his wife take their daughter to FAO Schwartz, and they agree to somehow forgive each other for, again, a thing that no one did, that did not happen, that no one has cheated on anybody. And then it's over. That's the movie.
Yeah.
And I think she gets a puppy. We don't see that. That's not canonical. But I suspect after going through that, they're going to feel some guilt. I think she's getting a puppy.
It is an absolute masterpiece. It is one of the best looking movies ever made.
It does look cool. It reminded me a lot of Barry Lyndon, actually, in that way.
Yeah.
Like, it looked... I assume that they were doing some lighting things similar to the... It's clearly not
that's the
fully
reason
lit,
why
like by candles.
So Christmas lit everywhere, because it's mostly Christmas lights lighting everything. Well, it also this movie sort of famously has, I believe it still has the record for the longest continuous film shoot. It was a 400-day film shoot. You guys are aware that there's only like 3 shots in this movie that were actually filmed in New York. This entire movie was filmed in a soundstage that Stanley Kubrick had a replica of New York built and was obsessive about every detail of it. So, like,
this is fascinating. So there is a scene where they're on a street that my wife and I were wondering, because there's a street near us in Koreatown that is the only street in Los Angeles that kind of looks like New York, basically. It's an alley that kind of looks like what a New York alley. There's one street that plays New York in every movie, basically, in Koreatown. Yeah. And we were wondering if it was that because it looked a little off, but then it was like, I don't know, this looks pretty good. This looks pretty New York-y for the rest of the time. Yeah. But then when they're in the apartment, you're like, well, that looks a lot like a matte painting of a building outside that window. This looks like it might be in a set. It was very confusing to me. So that's interesting information.
The entire movie was shot in London. The entire movie. Minus... And again, Stanley Kubrick, especially near the sort of last decades of his life, refused to fly. He is he's a born and raised. He's a New York Jew, grew up here, grew up in New York, had a lot of that sort of experience. Moved to London early in his career, never left.
It was like never leaving.
Like, I don't know.
This is wild because if you film for New York, almost anywhere in the world, it's cheaper rent. But you went to like the one city where it's not cheaper to have buildings than in New York.
I mean, you guys know, like, Full Metal Jacket was shot entirely in London.
What?
I haven't seen that since I was like 12. So I don't remember anything about it.
He shot all of the movie in the UK because he refused to leave the UK. He would just find locations. But yeah, so all of New York in this movie was shot on sound stages. It is all meticulously recreated details of, like, he had people go and take thousands and thousands of photos of, like, a bunch of specific blocks. And then he built the exact replica of the city he wanted, right?
Crazy.
And it goes, I think it works so well in this movie. Because, like I said, it adds a very dreamy feel to it. Like, it doesn't look right once you sort of know. Yeah. If you're, like, really looking at it.
We felt a little off, but I wasn't sure. Yeah.
There's something about these streets and the way that's lit and the way that, like, the amount of people on the streets. It all feels so dreamlike. Every sequence in New York City in this movie. I love the look of this movie. The aesthetics.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is really cool. But why did it take 400 days? That seems like too long.
It
seems like a long time to have like gaffers on retainer.
Yeah, he was a kind of crazy perfectionist who spent his time really sort of figuring stuff out. Obviously, there was probably dozens of scenes shot that were cut from this movie. And this from
have you watched? Have you watched the DVD Extra Matter or whatever?
I don't really know if
what
stuff
did they
like
cut?
that has been released. Like Kubrick was always pretty famous. He's kind of like, I think Nolan kind of gets this from him, but like never including deleted scenes. Like if it's deleted, it's deleted. The footage is just gone, but some of it might be out there. I've never seen it, but yeah, I mean, like he just was a crazy, perfectionist who made people do 100+ takes of every single.
That also seems
thing
like
in
of
this
all
movie,
the times to be a perfectionist, I'd be like, once everyone takes their shirts off, like, all right, we're just going to kind of do this once, and if it doesn't work, we'll cut around it.
Well, I mean, the
feel
sex
bad.
stuff, apparently he was very, very good about not doing that for that kind of stuff. It's mostly like the dialogue scenes, everything in the parody, everything like, I mean, especially you can really see it in Nicole Kidman's kind of big when she's sort of airing out her insecurities about like, when you're touching the itty bitty titties, you think they're thinking about the doctor's dicky, like when she's like saying stuff in this weird way. To me, that strange. Is just it just feels like that's 130 takes into doing this, and she's just like, I don't know what he wants. I'm just gonna go fucking weird and see what happens,
Okay. Okay. We're gonna pull this back for 1 second. So you guys, we tried this a little bit last week. We're gonna make some slight modifications and try it again. And last week I mistakenly referred to it as my patented, and because I was used to saying that from my patented summary. But this is the Read It and Weep team patent held on the currently 4-step review process. So we're gonna try to be a little more systematic about this. So I want to start, because I don't know if you can tell already, Ezra and I did not love it the way you loved it. I think we both have plenty to say, and I think there might be stuff I did love, but we're gonna let's start just with good. So we've heard some things that we're gonna start with what was good about it. We've heard some of your things. Ezra, what was something that you thought was good about this movie? What did you like about this movie?
At one point, I think someone orders just like, "What do you want?" They say a beer, and the waitress
and
is
they
like,
just go get it.
I don't
like
care.
It's the Old West.
Get a beer. Yeah, you get the worst beer we get. It's like I would like a food, please. I like it when a server does not have to put up with this.
There was I mean, this is the kind of like, it makes sense you're talking about this is meticulous, because I also liked the scene where he ordered diner coffee in New York. I've never done that. So there was where the coffee cups are just right under there, and then she's like, all right, and then writes you a $1 check and hands it over. And
wait, you got coffee in a bag, right?
He also got coffee in a bag. Yes, this is how did they do that in London? That's ridiculous. That's a New York only thing.
That felt very unsafe to me.
I love coffee in a bag. It's so upsetting. It's like viscerally upsetting to me when people do it, but it is such a classic New York thing that we've talked about on the show before. I've never experienced it. I'm sure it might happen in London. It's a subway thing is really what it is. So I'm sure they do like tea in a bag there, but it's you get a bagel, and for some reason you get this egg and cheese, which is egg and like a Kraft singles of cheese, which seems like New York could do better on cheese. But you get a bagel, egg, and cheese, and they put it in the bag, and then you get your coffee in, and they put that in the bag next to the bagel, and then roll up the top so you can get on the subway. Your other hand's there for booping your card on the way in. But man, that's just not the container. Anyway, I loved that they did that, and that was a good, like, this guy really believes in New York, even though he's recreating it. What else, Ezra? There's got to be other things that you like.
So the whole getting the costume side plot, like that whole like world we dropped into for a second.
Well,
was
I mean,
weird inside of weird.
Say, there's a lot of things in movies that like I've always dreamed about doing, and this movie doesn't have a lot of things I've dreamed about doing. But there's one. There's one.
Well, not that you thought of before you saw it.
Movie bucket list thing I've always wanted to do. And that is to bang on a business owner's door after close and be like, I will give you $200 if you reopen right now and sell me this thing I need. That just sounds like so much fun.
That thing is I totally agree. That sounds awesome. And it's hard because I don't carry a lot of cash. And this movie is about a guy who carries cash.
Yeah.
I think I see him spend at least $500 in this on just extra bribes in the first day, which is just a lot of cash for a dude to be carrying around.
He is bad at holding on to his funds, and also he is very ineffective at turning that into the cheating on his wife that he wants to have happen. He just like
the cheating return per dollar
is really poor.
But I mean, isn't that like, again, I think that's like when we kind of get into the sort of the deeper themes of this movie is like this idea of like he's rich, but he is not rich. You know what I mean? Like
that's one of those problems that I'm like, if you want me to not feel that bad for somebody, show me a guy who's so rich, and then this guy, he's got like a 5-bedroom in New York on right by the park. And then he's like, oh, but these other people, they get limos to the orgy, and I only took a cab. Which, even though the cab would probably cost more to have him sit. Anyway,
but I mean, that's just like one of the themes of like, like he thinks him and his family are well off, but there's like this whole other world that is.
Yeah, when he goes to that dinner party,
right?
They have a fireplace in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's the level of money they had, and that was cool.
This is one of the least competent Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
that
that's
whole
true. Scene with the shop owner.
Yeah, to go back to the shop owner.
His
so good. And although there's a second scene with the shop owner, undermines it, takes a lot of the fun out of it. Because I watched this first half of this movie without my wife, and then the second half she came in and joined me, and I was like, I was telling her the most fun I had in the first 90 minutes by far was the costume shop guy, where first he's like, you just flashed a doctor badge to get me to open my costume store. What's wrong with you? And then he's like, well, you look at my bald patch. And then he's like, fine, I'll just make all this money. And then he catches his daughter sleeping with 2 Japanese businessmen wearing makeup and is like very, very angry. And the scene's chaotic and brilliant. And it's really, it's a perfect no retreat, no surrender for this show, where it's like, this is a character who is not the star in this movie, but I would love to watch the adventure he's gone on these last few weeks, almost more than Tom Cruise. But so I'm like telling my wife, it's so exciting. She comes back and watches the second half. And the second half, it's just, we see the costume guy again. And he's like, oh, I just had those businessmen pay me, and now I will rent my daughter out to anybody. Would you like to sleep with my daughter for money?
Well,
really takes the fun out of that guy.
He was doing it the whole time. Like it's not like they actually worked something out. Like it was a show. I mean, what happens at the orgy. It was a show that he's pitting on for Tom Cruise so that he would leave with one impression, right? Like that is a running theme throughout this movie.
Okay. I love that. I did not realize that in this case. That is a better grift, and I do like him a little better again, although it's still gross.
Yeah, it's very gross.
It was fun to see Lily Sobieski, though.
Yeah.
Is that the daughter?
Yeah. She's been in a lot of stuff, and I forgot about her.
For example?
She's like Never Been Kissed. There's a lot of kind of like movies, and there's like a lot. I feel like movies in like the mid late 90s and like early aughts.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
she's doing a lot of good stuff.
I also enjoyed this relates both to side characters who are interesting and also to the him splashing cash around, which is that he hires a prostitute initially. Well, a prostitute picks him up, brings him to her apartment. And then he can't go through with it, but he pays her anyway, which it raises some interesting questions. He pays her $150, which is the rate, which seems okay. So 2 things. Let me ask your opinions on this. Number 1, is that a good price?
I have to keep checking inflation rates.
Like her, yeah. I mean, she definitely looked like a pretty high end prostitute for $150.
You think she looked too nice? You think that price seems like a good deal for her?
Yeah. But I mean, also,
I feel like if also bringing your personal apartment is like a huge risk. That feels like it should be more expensive. But I don't know. $150 is a lot of money still.
$270. No.
I mean, it's one of those things that it. I mean, it's like when you think of this movie as like, I haven't read the book, but apparently it's very, very. The book and this movie, besides the fact that like that one takes place in late 19th century. Or the late 1800s, early 1900s Venice, right?
Mm-hmm.
A scene like that makes a lot more sense than it does in like a modern day New York when she walks him right up to her apartment. But again, it feels that very much like that dream logic thing. Like he meets her on a street, and by the end of the block, they are standing in front of a blood red door that she just walks him straight into her apartment through, right? Like it is.
But here's my question: do you tip on the 150? Because I feel like anytime somebody's providing a service, you probably expected to tip. But my wife feels like it's different if you're like a sole proprietor versus like if you're working for somebody. Like the fact that she seems to be a sole proprietor means she's getting all that 150, so you don't need to tip additionally. But if like if a barista gives you coffee, you give them $1 or whatever because that's money that goes straight to them, not going to the business owner. But if somebody is like, I'm a coffee roaster, and then they like sell you the bag, you're not going to tip on that the same way. That's like, hey, thanks for coming to my. If you came to that person's
personal
apartment
services
and they
are
made
usually
you coffee,
different, though. I think it's just once you interact intimately in any kind of situation, right? That's usually still involved. And plus, I think it's just tipping in this case is just that I don't know what I'm doing tax, right? Where it's like, well, I don't know.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I hope I'm not a jerk here. So here you go. I think that.
Well, we just finished watching White Lotus, and in that one, the price was like 3,000 euros a night, which is a lot more, but it was for the night and not for the hour, and so I don't really know how all that works. But it seems like they did tip in White Lotus, and that seemed like a please don't tell my family who's also on this vacation tax.
Yeah. I definitely think tipping is actually supposed to be standard in sex work. I'm not.
I'll pass this along to my wife because that was my point. So I think I'm glad you guys are agreeing with me.
No.
How about this, Anthony? Is it standard in sex work to buy her a cake the next day?
I mean, everyone likes a free cake. I'm going to say that.
I mean, it's hard to be mad. That was such a charming thing. I assumed he was going to try to do the sex again if she had been home, but instead he just gave the cake to her roommate. But I like the cake. But then this is not an etiquette question. This is like a street smart, and everyone agrees I'm street smart. You guys know that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I am street smart enough to know that if I was kissing a prostitute and she was like, "Hey, I have something I need to tell you," I would not be like, "Yeah, later." If a prostitute tells you that she has something to say,
well, wait,
you probably need to hear that message.
Wait, we don't know if that person was a prostitute.
If I'm making out with a stranger and they're like, I have something I need to tell you, that's a good, I need to hear that thing before we can. That is like such a mood stop sign that he's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you got to tell me something later. Yeah. I've never I've not been in that situation, but I'm street smart enough to know I would like to tune into that news immediately because it's something. It's not going to be like, I think you look handsome today. It's not that. It's like something I need to tell you. Okay, I trust your judgment.
Why I love Tom Cruise's performance so much in this movie is like he has that like enthusiasm and that charm that Tom Cruise is really good at turning on in like interviews or like in movies a lot of the time, but it's like weaponized against him. Like it is so clearly coming from a place of like insecurity and self-doubt and like this like real urge he needs for like validation and feeling like, you know, like a man, right? Like this like toxic masculinity trait, right? And you see it really well with like the two girls at the party at the beginning that he's just like obviously floating to like feeling control of, and then he like immediately
okay, but also those two women. That was the time where I was like, this feels like this is his dream. No, there's no way. I mean, even Tom Cruise, people don't throw themselves at somebody like that.
But I mean,
at a party?
when you think about it as like the party, I mean, okay, so like there's two parties in this movie, right? And they're like literally mirror opposites of each other, right? But they're like essentially, when you think about it, they're like the same party, but just mirrored flipped, right? You have like the Christmas one that is like, it's all bright. There's Christmas lights everywhere. Everyone's wearing clothes. Their faces are exposed.
That's true.
Right?
It is flipped. Oh, that is a very good point. It's all, it's all no masks, yes clothes. That's a good point.
Like, and it is like, there is this sexual undertone that's under everything. There's, you know, fucked up stuff happening upstairs in the office that no one knows about, but it is certainly happening. And it is there, right? But it's like this illusion, and it's like it's just covered in Christmas stuff. It's just covered in Christmas imagery everywhere.
The flip is that at the other party, there is a sexual overtone, but then the undertone is these are boring weirdos.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea
this is
that,
an office party. That, like, we see the sex, but we're like, secretly, this feels like an obligation. This is a boring rich person party.
Oh my God.
It is like there's no Christmas imagery anywhere, right? It's all ritual. It's all religious.
Right.
It's all ceremonial imagery.
It's very War on Christmas. They can't even say Merry Christmas at this orgy. It's crazy.
They're wearing masks. They're not
this
wearing
is a woke
clothes.
orgy.
It's you're really undermining the point I'm trying to make about the fucking brilliance of this movie. But no,
if we were going to make a soundbite about Read It and Weep discusses important cinema, it would be that moment where you're like trying to say something serious and then you stop to say you're really undermining the point here.
But no, I get it.
Okay, so it turns out we have to keep moving. Ezra's got a snowstorm he's got to be caught in soon, so we do have to move on to some other things really quick. So the next thing I want to say is I want to talk about really quick what we did not like about it. I think we should be more clear about why we weren't as in love with it as you were. And I want to start out, Anthony, my biggest criticism of this movie is that there were no vampires. And I was positive this was a vampire movie when we started it. We didn't mention it when we were talking about it before, and I thought that was weird. Every image of Tom Cruise with his like collar up that is in a preview of this movie, I thought this was Interview with a Vampire. Isn't he in Interview with a Vampire?
Yes, he's Interview with a Vampire. Yeah.
I thought this was that movie. I was sure.
Do you think this is a sequel to Interview with a Vampire? Is that how it works?
Forgot that one was called Interview with a Vampire. I thought this was the name of a vampire movie starring Tom Cruise.
Because there's a vampire behind you. Is what you thought the full title was.
Well, it was like about darkness and the night. He looks like a vampire in every and they have those monks and the red mask. This is a vampire movie for sure.
Well, I mean, you could definitely say the rich are vampires.
Confused.
Yes,
I mean,
the world is also a vampire.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there are definitely vampires in this movie, just not in the way normal people normally think of it.
And we don't know they weren't. Look, anyone who did not say literally, "I'm not a vampire," right? Like those people could still be vampires, as far as we know.
Yeah,
so
that could explain what being absolved meant or whatever.
Can I make another little thing I feel like about the really good things about this movie? I just wanted to go back just real fast and say, So like, I'm really happy that on this podcast we've now done my 2 favorite Stanley Kubrick movies. But this year we have done the two of my favorite movies that are in a very specific subgenre of movies, but is my absolute favorite genre of movie, which is the movies that have a scene in which Sidney Pollack explains to the main character exactly how the world really is, bro.
I liked it better in Michael Clayton, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, in Michael Clayton, it's very different vibes, but Sidney Pollack is so fucking good at that, like, come on in, I'm going to explain to you what's up, and you either take it or you don't. You do what you need. But this,
but he's
and
lying though in this one.
I mean, maybe. I think you're feeling that these are a bunch of dorks, right? That this is all a play. That this is all but stage acting for them, right? The whole thing is like a big presentation they put on to scare him, because that's all these people have. But I mean, I do also think that the movie
he showed up, they were already mid monk stuff, so they were doing this without him. And I should also clarify,
the thing at the end is a show for him. The thing at the beginning is a show for them, right? Like,
that part I don't understand either, but we'll come back to that. I want to be clear though, for the people listening to the show, I love dorks. Dorks are my favorite people. Dorks are amazing, and I am not shaming dorks. And one of the things that's very fun and funny to me about the kink community is that they're like, it's sex D&D, and I think that's wonderful. I love regular D&D. I think that's awesome. So this is not a shaming, but man, for Baby's first orgy, he sure got one that was high on dorks. Like, there's a lot. There are sex clubs Tom Cruise could have gone to in New York that night, and it would cost him a lot of money because he's a single dude, and they pay like quadruple or whatever. But like, he just could go to a normal one where it's just people having sex around. To have one that was so focused on these ridiculous, embarrassing masks, it's just and incense, like which is just a disgust. Like, what a terrible smell that room had when he walked in there. Yeah,
this is the tough thing about small sample size. I think generally is that, like, you just don't know if this is a pretty standard off the shelf orgy, or is this a unique kind of bespoke. This is the weird
exactly
LARPing.
I am really upset about the idea, like them being weird to him. Like, he has the password, and whether or not he seems like one of the normal people, the only reason you have a password is for that to be a bearer bond, for you don't have a guest list. The point of the password is if you have this, you get in. If it is a guest list, if it's only people that are known to them, there's no reason to have a password. You just let in the people who are supposed to be at the orgy. You just have the person at the door check the list or knows everybody. Like, having an ID requirement and a password is ridiculous.
Well, no, that's
it's
the thing,
so
though.
silly.
Like, if he was supposed to be there, right? And like, I don't just mean like on a list. It is literally he is not of this world, right? He is like,
right.
He is somewhere he is not supposed to be, right? It is not that he like just isn't on a list or that he doesn't know the password. It's that like everything about his presentation is wrong. He is like a complete like phony there. And they, of course, they were going to sniff him out. Right?
I should be clear, by the way. So I should take a step back, which is I do know a fair amount of sex clubs from the sex clubs in Portland that have comedy shows. So I've done comedy shows in sex clubs many times where they're not having sex, they're just doing the awkward beforehand part, and I just feel like my experience.
There's a warm up. Wait. There's a warm up act.
Yes. They do like a social hour where everyone just wants to drink a little bit, get comfortable in the room, and then you leave, and then they do all the stuff. Yeah. Apparently, like if you do them like if you do the like home parties, there's also always a buffet, which I think is fascinating.
Laughter is the best aphrodisiac, as they say.
Exactly.
Right?
People, hearing me talk, everyone right now, ragingly horny. It's very difficult to drive. This is really upsetting people. The point is, everyone looks a little bit like they don't belong. Like, that's one of the things about the sex clubs, is that it's like, you feel a little out of place. Everyone's a little weird, and then you get comfortable later. So the fact that he looked a little weird, I feel like that, like everyone there is feeling a little bit Tom Cruise.
But again, Alex, you're thinking about this as like it's like this is whole, you're on like the other side of the coin of people who like, which is a lot of people out there who believe like this movie was Stanley Kubrick admitting the truth of what actually happens at Hollywood parties, and he was murdered.
There's not people like that.
Oh my God.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's like you can. It's hard to find actual criticism on this movie because I mean, all Stanley Kubrick movies, like there are people who believe The Shining is him admitting to faking the moon landing. Right? There's people really love to go deep in.
That's not a serious critic that writes that point.
But yeah, not a serious critic, but like there's a huge amount. And if you like look up YouTube essays on this movie, there's going to be a lot of great criticism out there, but a huge part of it is people being like, this is him showing what the Illuminati is actually like, and this is him documenting and confessing, and that's why they had him killed, right?
No.
And you're like, you're like on the opposite end of that when you're like,
no one ever has ever behaved this way. This is the most insane, illogical behavior.
Well, again, because it's not about what's happening. It's about the internal. This movie is called Eyes Wide
I believe
Shut.
The only way I believe that this makes sense if it's like, this is a guy who's never been to an orgy. He's a little bit repressed. This repressed doctor. He's imagining what an orgy might look like if he went. Like, he talked to the piano player and was like, well, I'm not going to go, obviously. What would this be like? And then he thought of this, because this is bonkers. It's just so silly. Every bit of it is so silly. Okay, but we have to wrap up really quick. Couple of last thoughts. One thing I think we have to discuss. We have to talk about jealousy. So, as mentioned earlier, we're three long married people, and this is a movie about jealousy. It's a movie about specifically hypothetical jealousy.
Well,
jealousy.
Yes,
I mean,
but
like,
also these things were actually happening to a married couple with other people at the same time of filming this. So this is real, just not in the story, right? Like, Nicole Kidman is actually naked, making out with that dude while she's married to Tom Cruise in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, that is like, like there is another thing that goes into like.
I didn't know he was ever married to a human woman. That's weird.
Yeah, he's been married to a few, but him and Nicole Kidman were like the biggest power couple of the 90s. But like,
But was this before or after Scientology like picked a wife for him?
Well, no.
Forced
So
him to marry her?
The thing, like the sort of common understanding of the timeline is like he was with Scientology since the 80s, but he met Nicole Kidman in the 90s. They got together. Apparently, they adopted a bunch of kids. They were really in love. She was pulling him away from the church, is how the story kind of goes. And the church realized they couldn't do that, so they stepped in and basically ruined their marriage and made her want to leave.
Makes sense.
To
Okay.
like completely lock him up. But yeah, this was like at the height of their power. And also like, there's some really interesting stories about the way like Kubrick filmed this. Like, so all the stuff with like his imagination of Nicole Kidman with the Omi guy, right? One, he was apparently very respectful of Nicole Kidman and said, "You have complete editorial say over what shots I put in and out of this movie. I'm going to screen everything for you." But the thing he wouldn't allow was Tom Cruise to be on that set or to know anything about what happened on that set. Like, he didn't want Nicole Kidman like, talking to him because he just wanted it to like, okay, there's a guy and Stanley Kubrick and my wife are in this room for days on end filming God knows what, and I'm not allowed to know what they're filming, right? And like that like comes through in his performance, that like sense of paranoia and like that worry. And I think it's really smart filmmaking and really lends to like bringing out something in Tom Cruise's performance.
I that is interesting. I do feel like the three of us though, like I'm assuming from having hung out with you guys that if your wife was like, "Hey, remember before we were married, I saw this hot Navy guy. I thought about having sex with him right then. I pictured it."
Well, I mean, this isn't before we were married. This was if your wife said last summer when we were at vacation, I want you to know I
thought it was before they were married. I thought she said we were dating, but they weren't married yet. They didn't have a kid yet.
This was last year, is what she said. Said this is last year, and I want you to know if this guy had come up to me, I would have left you right then and there for one night with this guy.
If my wife said that, great, awesome. I was like, yeah, but you wouldn't have though. You wouldn't have. That's like you just had a brief fantasy a year ago. The idea of somebody being this upset about somebody telling you about a thing that they daydreamed a year ago is so nutty to me.
I think, yeah, and it looks like this is adapted straight from the 1926 like novel, which like I think that makes sense then, where it's like this. It
makes more sense that a hot naval officer in a motel came up to you. Yeah.
There's a hot Danish naval officer in the book.
Okay,
but yeah, so it seems like this is like you have to adjust for inflation, I guess. Also,
but
like
you also need to 90 plus years? You need to look
at jealousy inflation. What is the fantasy that she had? So this is like, oh, he's like a firefighter who just got off a truck and he's holding a puppy.
Well, also, and you actually do some stuff. I think it's like 90 plus years. You actually have to like things have to happen, right?
Right. I mean, that's
true. It's more just the idea of like the person he thought his wife was and the assumptions that he built their entire relationship off. And he's sort of seeing that that's a mask, as it were. What? It's like this mask imagery.
But it's not. Repeating. That's crazy. Like when I sit down in an exit row, I have a brief fantasy of the plane crashing and me saving everybody, and then people are really nice to me. No one is like, "Wow, you took off your mask there, Alex. You really showed that what you want is human suffering." That's insane. This is like if you punished people for. She's like. He's literally mad at her for a dream. He has her tell him the dream. He's like, "Tell me more of that dream." And she's crying. She's like, "I can't. The dream is so sexy." And then he's like, "You got to tell me the dream." And the dream is like, and then the sex continued. And it wasn't like, and then my old boss took me to a soccer game. Like,
that's not
it makes no sense. Dreams are insane.
Alex, you're completely misunderstanding the scene. She is telling him, and this is not a dream she had. She is like, okay, so it's again.
She said it was a dream.
No.
He's like, "Tell me the dream." She's like, "I just woke up from a dream. I'm so sorry I misinterpreted that as that being a dream she had and that he was having her tell her the dream."
No, he's not. She's not waking up from a dream. You're confusing two scenes. This is the scene when they're smoking pot and she is like,
No, I know that scene. I know. But then later he's like, so that he was mad at her for a fantasy. And then later he's like, "Tell me your sex dream and I'm going to be really serious about it." It's insane.
No, she describes the night he just had. She dreamed about. That's what's happening in that scene. That's why that's weird, because she's literally dreamed about what happened to him. It's almost like he's dreaming this entire time. But you have to think
it doesn't add emotional weight to be like, this is his dream. That's like literally the thing you write at the end of a movie to take away the emotional weight of everything.
No, it's not. Again, though, it's not like it is.
It's not literal, but it's about jealousy.
Much more to this movie than you're making it describe, right? Like the whole scene with them smoking pot is like her own insecurities.
That makes me think that drugs are bad.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for
they
sure.
smoke a tiny amount of pot, and they go from the happiest, sexiest couple to just fighting over nothing immediately.
What strain is this? Oh, it's just the angry jealousy strain. I don't know. Why do we still have this?
I was more in the mood for sativa, but I guess we'll do it. Yeah, that was like, I mean, that felt like reefer madness straight up. Like, just you take one hit, your marriage falls apart. Oh, I think Anthony froze for a second. Okay.
No, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm listening. I just I wasn't sure what you want.
But if your wife described this naval officer to you, like, would either of you be upset about this?
No, I think this seems, I'm going to say, like, this feels like an overreaction generally. You know, I would maybe try to understand, is there like what's the, like, are we doing some naval cosplay later? Is that the thing that's coming up next? Like, is this where?
I can't do Navy, but I can do tugboat captain. Is that what you need? Is this just a boat thing?
You were latching on to the boat part of it. It was like, I hope it's boats, because I like boats too.
I have this fantasy that we'd be in the bathtub and we'd have a lot of little boat toys. It's so weird. And I know that jealousy is a bigger issue for people who look more like Tom Cruise than it is for me. But then even the flip side, where she's like crying, he's just too buff. And people who work out that much, they spend a lot of time being jealous, I think. But later that she's crying when he describes this night. And I feel like if I had gone on this adventure that Tom Cruise went on, even in his dream, and explained this to my wife, she would be so secondhand embarrassed for me. She would not be upset that I'd ruined the sanctity of our marriage. She would be like, well, first of all, wash your hands. And second of all, I can't believe you got thrown out of an Illuminati orgy.
Yeah, I can't believe you ruined someone's nice orgy.
Yeah, it would be so embarrassing, I think. This is like the most cringe night he could describe to her, and we wouldn't be fighting in FAO shorts. We'd be like, look, you have really embarrassed the family. I cannot believe you took off your mask in front of all these rich people and been like, oh, I'm the person at the orgy who doesn't know how to behave. Like, these
are mostly your clients, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And now they know that you don't know what's up with an orgy.
Exactly. Like, you just told all of our best clients that you don't, that you're a soft lay. It's weird. It's just so weird. Okay. Anyway, we have to wrap up because Ezra's got to go. So now we have to rank it. Normally we'd have one more phase, but I think we got to get going. So
can you give me 1 through 50? I don't know how to put this. Anthony, I think I want you to lead the thinking on it.
I'm going to say number 1 because you guys are going to say something too low. I think you guys have I think that this is a movie that will grow with you. The more you kind of sit with it, the longer you have with it. If you revisit it eventually, I generally do think this is the best film from one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. This and Barry Lyndon are his two. I mean, all of his movies are masterpieces. But Barry Lyndon and this are the two movies that speak with me the most. I absolutely do love this movie. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. Truly, and without any faults, this movie's a masterpiece. It deserves to be number 1 on the list. You guys haven't taken it seriously enough. You've kind of hurt my feelings in talking about it. But that's fine.
Okay. That's fine. A couple of things on that. First of all, Ezra, there's only 40 movies, so I can't give you 1 to 50. Second of all, I am going to post the list of the top 41 movies of 2022 of all time that we watched, and I'm going to post this on our socials. And we're going to do an episode next in 2 weeks. We're going to do our like recap episode for the season. And one of the things we're going to do is re-rank the list. So we're going to try to rebuild this list and see if it represents us as a group better than the current list. So I will post it, and I would love to have you email me, listeners, and tell me what movies you think deserve the most re-examining after in post on this list. So I'll post the top 40.
Anthony,
yeah, go.
Well, it's just Anthony. I think here's the thing is I could definitely say, like, so one, as a filmmaking like thing, this is amazing for sure, right? Where it's like, this is like, there's so much work that went into this. And I absolutely believe there's like, they're saying a lot of stuff. I think that there's things of the maybe aesthetics of it, I guess, that like just like didn't do it for me in terms of like the way the storytelling like unwrapped, and I couldn't like quite like. I felt like I didn't understand. Like I know when you prep me for Lynch stuff, I was like, okay, I know kind of like what I have to do, the shift I have to do in order to make this make sense, right? The way that I can translate this into like a movie going experience that I get. I didn't know what the shift was I had to make in order like to quite like be able to consume this whole hog, I guess, for me. Whereas like it felt like there's some like stylistic stuff for like the dialogue that felt like I don't know, just awkward for me, I guess. I couldn't quite get into. And like I had a tough time making that adjustment.
That like saying, like I said, doing takes like 100 or so times. You get to that weird, stilted, very Kubrick-esque delivery that he likes so much, right?
Yeah.
But
and that might not be the thing that we like.
No, I think that's something with especially if this is the first time both of you have seen this movie. I think that the biggest hurdle this movie has is the perception of the movie going into it, right? Because of the way people talk about this movie, the way this movie was marketed, its sort of place in culture. I think like
you think the fact that I thought it was Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, the fact that if you go and think it's a vampire movie, I think this is a movie that works much better once you've seen it and once you know what it is, once you know what you're getting into. And if you're willing to sort of like watch it and engage with it, and again, like I said, every time I've watched this movie, I have taken away something different from it because I'm at a different point in my life. And I think like the things that you were making fun of, Alex, about like the way you and your wife would be in this situation, I found this movie, especially as my wife and I have been together for so long, and this idea of like as a relationship has changed, as it is like our perceptions of each other has changed. And the idea is like when you're married to someone, you're not married to one person that entire time. You're married to a bunch of different people because people change. Your perceptions of them change. And I found this movie on this most recent viewing to be like, maybe it didn't like relate to you guys, but I was like floored by this movie and the way it made me think about relationships, the way it made me think about my partner, the way it made me think about like every couple I know, the way we interact in situations. I genuinely think this is one of the best movies about marriage ever made. I think it is a movie that's genuinely for adults, which is something I really love about it. And something I talk about enough, how like they don't make movies for adults. Like this is, like I described it earlier, as Wizard of Oz for adults. And I love that about it.
If you would call, so I guess as far as like how you go into it and what you expect, if you'd called it Sex Wizard of Oz, definitely would have liked that better.
Okay.
I do want us to do more of a consensus building for these lists in the future, but for time constraints, we cannot do that. So we're going to do averages for one final time, and this is going to be a weird placement. So Ezra, we have one vote already. Where do you want it?
Right between Lost Highway and Dead Ringers. This is sort of like
that's exactly what I was going to say. Movies. I was thinking, so it's like it is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Michael Clayton. We talked about both of those today. It's right, and that's right in the center. And I feel like it's similar to It's definitely better than Dead Ringers for me, but it's not as much fun as Michael Clayton, and it doesn't seem as like as like the point of it does not seem as strong as Out of Sight. So I was thinking at 21.5 as well. So Anthony is going to give it a solid 0.5, and then we're going to add 21.5 twice.
You know what I'll actually allow? Anthony, if you want to do your best guess of what you think Hunter would have put it at, we can add that to the average.
I don't know. I think he would have rated this very high as well. I mean, we should have reached out to him earlier. Send a ranking.
But we're going to have to re-rank all of these next week. So I think what this ends up doing is this ends up putting it right below Batman and above But I'm a Cheerleader. And I do think in terms of like movies, I think this is up there with, this is kind of a similar to Batman Returns for me, in that I don't think that it is actually the most important movie, but I do think it, like, I like when somebody goes all out on bonkers, and it had a lot to talk about. I do think that the weakest part of this is the supposed human emotions that we're supposed to be examining. But I think it was a really interesting movie. Okay, so here's what we do. So that's where we're going to leave it for now at 14. Or wait, no, at where did it just go? Yeah. Right. At 15. It's the 15th best movie of all time.
And there's still, for you listeners out there, there's still a few days before Christmas. This is a great Christmas movie. Get the whole family together. Watch it right everywhere. After you open gifts at 11 a.m. It is happy holidays, people. Watch Eyes Wide Shut. It's really good.
So this has done a really interesting thing for us. So as you remember, we've had a lot of maneuvering in the final weeks of this game, and this has caused a real stir because Hunter chose this movie. It was Hunter's choice. It is a holiday movie, which means Hunter would have gotten a bonus point. But just like any raffle, you need to be present to win. So Hunter has not received his bonus point, which means we are going into our final week tied with a 3-way tie for first at 20 points, and Ezra in a distant fourth at 18. And that is where the game finishes. Now, do we go into overtime? Is there a shootout? Do we have does it go to the judges? Is there an applause-o-meter? What happens to not up this time? We'll figure it out in our re-ranking next week. I have some suggestions. I was thinking perhaps, and I would love to hear yours at home too. Something we can finish next week that doesn't involve watching all of those movies.
By next week, do you mean not actually next week?
Yes, next episode. Sorry, next episode, which will be out in about 2 weeks, something like that. I was thinking one thing we could do is go through the master list of quality as it stands now, and give everybody points based on how well the movies you chose did on that list. I think that would be an interesting choice. I think that would probably put Ezra and I at a disadvantage, but I do think it would be interesting. I think that's really, really interesting. But anyway, something like that might be fun. Okay, but we have to go. That is it for the final full episode of season 5. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to Read It and Weep and being with us. It means so much to me. We will be back again in 2 weeks. Like I said, we're taking a week off for the holidays to get Hunter out of the snow. And then we will be back and we will be talking about the season 5 in review. And then we'll be talking a little bit more about the future and where we go from here. That should be really interesting. We got some interesting things planned. I can't wait to hear more I can't wait to talk to you more about it, share more of what we've been working on. Podcast at read-weep.com is the email address. Thanks to all the meat buddies who support the show. Godspeed, Hunter. Thanks for being here, Ezra.
Yeah, Anthony, I think my favorite part about this is hearing you talk about it.
That's been true of a lot of movies, but I completely agree. This is a thing I said at your wedding speech, in fact, that there's something about having you around for a thing that makes that thing better, and I genuinely believe that.
Sweet. Thank you.
And I think that's definitely true about this. My top 2 favorite parts were you and the nudity. All right, and thanks for being here, Anthony.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Watch Avatar: The Way of Water in theaters now. It's fucking great. It's so good.
I do think we very, very quickly. I need to explain to people that it's because if you haven't heard it, and it was continued offline. It's because of my lack of excitement that Anthony thinks James Cameron needs his marketing help. It's not.
There is no way. I'm like I think a moderate fan. I think there is no way that you leave seeing this movie and you're just covered in every bodily fluid. I think that's what's going to happen, right?
Wait,
so
there's no way that you're covered in bodily fluid?
Yes. There's no way you're not covered in every single bodily fluid.
There's no way you're not covered?
Yes. You're
like, I'm going to bleed on myself if I watch this movie?
Every fluid.
Oh. What about bile?
Yeah, that's one of them.
The saliva and the different saliva from the back of your mouth and the front of your mouth.
Are those different ones?
All I'm going to say is in Avatar: The Way of Water, one of the main characters is a whale, and he's my best friend, and he's the greatest action star of the 21st century. Legitimately.
What started with that? I would love to watch a movie about whales.
Is he entering the DC Extended Universe?
No, he's on Pandora. He's the best character. I love him. I swear to God, a main character in Avatar is a whale. It's so fucking good. It's so good.
Well, maybe go see that. Have a good holiday break, everybody. Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2023. Psh.